Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while. It's been about 10 months since the last round of videos. Yeah, I have no excuses. I was just lazy. But I'm back and we have a new series of videos for you. This is going to be counting down the years between 1959 and 2019 and giving you my favorite albums for each of those years. One disclaimer on this: this first episode covers a span of years, 1959 to 1963, and then when we get to the 2000s, I have those 20 years divided into two videos. But the rest of the years in between 1964 to 1999, we will actually have a full list of favorite albums for each individual year. Again, I will say, like a lot of YouTubers that do these kind of videos, these are just my favorites. They're not necessarily even the ones I consider to be the best or the most well-made albums of the year. These are just the ones that I am likely to play the most and enjoy the most from each of these years. That said, let's start. This is 1959 to 1963. Oh, and one more thing. Especially in this year, I don't have a lot of these albums in my collection. I used to over the time. I just had to thin out the collection or sell them or whatever. So if I don't have them, I'll be putting them up in this area here, the album art covers, so you can see what it looks like. Okay, let's start. 1959 to 1963. We're going to do a top 15 for these years because, you know, there's more to choose from. So number 15, I have John Lee Hooker, House of the Blues. This was actually one of my first blues albums I ever got when I was about 15, 16 years old. I'd gotten the cassette version from, I think it was Kmart. They had a rack of $5 cassettes, all kind of like the cheapy ones. And I'm not sure why I chose this one. I knew who John Lee Hooker was, but I didn't know any of his music. I just it looked interesting. Very curious album, though, in the fact that they used vari-speed techniques. So on his guitar leads, they sped up his guitar, which means that they had to have had him record it while the track was playing back at a slower speed. So when it played back at regular speed, his guitar lead would be sped up. And just drenched in reverb. I like the sound, but it doesn't sound anything like any other blues albums from that time. So John Lee Hooker, great collection of songs there as well. Number 14, jazz album, Charlie Mingus, The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. My sweet spot for jazz kind of rests where hard bop and cool jazz meet with free jazz and avant-garde. When you get that combination, for me, that is the best jazz. And Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is right there. Charlie Mingus, of course, starting out in the hard bop tradition, but here he really takes some elements of the upcoming free jazz movement, not totally freaking out free jazz, but just some dissident influences that really give this personality and an interest level that's I don't know, sometimes they could go too far with it, I feel, but this is a really great combination of the two elements. Number 13, a Christmas album, Phil Spector, A Christmas Gift for You. This is like the classic Christmas album. Obviously, when you hear the classics of Christmas, at least when I was growing up, when you didn't have the Mariah Careys yet classifying as classics, you had basically two eras. You had the Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby era, but then you also had the early 60s uh, basically this album, Phil Spector's bands that he was producing, he had them do Christmas songs. And of course, with Phil Spector, he's got the full wall of sound on there. He's got the reverb on there. It has this just this incredible feeling to it. And since they're Christmas songs, it fits. It really fits. Possibly my favorite Christmas album, although we'll be talking about another one in the next program, which is my favorite Christmas album, but it's not really a Christmas album. It's the Die Hard of music. Number 12, Chuck Berry, On Top. This album is so good. You know, you can get a Chuck Berry compilation album like the 28, 28 Great Ones? Slipped my mind for a moment. But if you want a studio album, this one is the one to go with. It has a bunch of his singles that were hits, but it also has some deeper cuts that are really good too. And it shows you, it gives you a really good glimpse into Chuck Berry's style when he was at his top. He could mix blues, chess blues with R&B and rock and roll, and he created his own sound. And not only that, but he was actually a really good lyricist. The music tends to get a little repetitive. A lot of the songs kind of sound like each other. They're just slight variations, but the lyrics, for his time, when most people were just tossing off lyrics, or actually most songwriting agencies were just tossing off lyrics because this is a fad, this rock and roll fad that no one's going to care about in a few years. It's just for the kids. Chuck Berry was actually spending time on his lyrics and trying to create storylines, which it's great. Number 11, Ornette Coleman, The Shape of Jazz to Come, one of the most important jazz records, I think, because this was really at the point where hard bop started to change to something more interesting, and not that it wasn't interesting before, but this is where it started to evolve into something much different. Every song on here is really cool, but the very first song, Lonely Woman, one of my favorite jazz tracks of all time. I remember Lou Reed one time, I read that he said that it was a song that continually, every time he heard it, knocked him out. Number 10, Kimio Ito, Koto Music. This album I got to know because of Buddhist meditation. I was looking for different music to kind of invoke a meditative state, which I know that in Buddhism you're not really supposed to have music playing, but it helped. And this album is full of traditional Japanese melodies performed so gorgeously. All of Kimio Ito's albums from this time period were great, but Koto Music is one that I would really go back to a lot. Very difficult to find now. The album is pretty expensive, and I don't think it's ever been released on CD as far as I know. Which is why I don't have it. Number 9, Link Wray and his Rayman. Link Wray, excellent guitar player, underrated guitar player, really gritty and distorted and just mean sounding guitar. His one really big hit, Rumble, was banned in a lot of spots in America because they felt it was inciting teen violence and riots. It's an instrumental. That's how powerful his guitar playing was. Now the whole album, it's not as good as Rumble, but it's very good. It's especially if you like early 60s distorted, not surf guitar, but more of a early garage rock sound. Great. He doesn't get enough credit as a guitarist. So yeah. Now number 8 I do have, and this one I think a lot of people would put this one a lot higher for this time period, but Bob Dylan, the freewheelin' Bob Dylan. his second album and his first album that was all his own material. It has Blowin' in the Wind. It opens with Blowin' in the Wind, which I appreciate the sentiment of Blowin' in the Wind, but for some reason the song has always irritated me. But that said, the rest of the album, I mean, Don't Think Twice, It's Alright is one of the best breakup songs of all time. Masters of War, possibly the best protest song. His Talking World War III Blues, all of his talking stuff is pretty hilarious. Oxford Town I really enjoy too. A very simple song but very pointed message. So Dylan was definitely at the peak of his, well, maybe not the peak. He was heading into the peak of his protest period here. But I do find this album much more enjoyable, more enjoyable than The Times They Are A-Changin', which is kind of his peak protest. Yeah, classic album and a big influence on John Lennon and the rest of the Beatles. But this album particularly really started to steer John Lennon in the direction of writing more introspective things rather than just pop love songs. Number 7, already losing my place. The Beach Boys, Surfin' USA. The early Beach Boys albums are just fun. There's nothing groundbreaking here in the area of surf music. It was much better than their competitors. But as far as long-lasting technical advancement and epicness, no, not at all. They'd get to that later, definitely. But the first few Beach Boys albums are just fun to listen to. This one, Surfin' USA, Noble Surfer, but it does have Lonely Sea on it, which I think, to me, is the very first indication that Brian Wilson could do some amazing things. And of course, he'd go on to do really amazing things. Number 6, a little country. Hank Thompson's Songs for Rounders. I don't know what initially led me to this album, but I'm so glad I found it. This is, to me, the best country album of this period. Hands down. I really love Buck Owens too, but oh man, this is just great. And I was familiar with Johnny Cash's version of Cocaine Blues off of Folsom Prison. Did not realize that he had patterned it so closely after another version, and that other version that he patterned it after, his version that he patterned it after, was the Hank Thompson version on this album. This is great. I can throw this on anytime and love it. But it's one of those albums that flies under the radar as far as I know. It doesn't get talked about a lot. And I've listened to other Hank Thompson albums. They don't hit me quite as much as Songs for Rounders does, so it's a great album. Number 5, the Beach Boys' debut, Surfin' Safari. To me, a better album than Surfin' USA. The songs are a little bit more enjoyable, I think. Surfin' Safari, of course. County Fair is silly, but it's fun. 10 Little Indians, we won't really talk about that. Chug-a-Lug, the ode to drinking a lot of root beer. Come on. 409, of course, Surfin'. My favorite song on here is Heads You Win, Tails You Lose. And Cuckoo Clock is also great. So again, nothing earth-shattering here, but just a fun album. And their debut, right out of the gate, they're already doing some great stuff. Number 4, this one might seem a little odd to have this higher than the previous album by this artist, but I'm going to put Bob Dylan's Self-Titled at number 4, just because I love this album. A lot of Dylan fans dismiss it. Bob Dylan himself was not very happy with the album. But I think that it's really well engineered and produced. It's just Bob alone in the studio with his guitar and harmonica, and it sounds so crisp and clean. It sounds like Dylan is right there in the room with you. Granted, it's all covers except for his song for Woody, about Woody Guthrie, but the songs he chooses are all strong songs. You're No Good starts the album, but you also have In My Time of Dying, which he sounds like a 60-year-old blues guy. What's the Baby Let Me Follow You Down? One of my favorite early Dylan songs. So I love that album, much to the chagrin of other Dylan fans. Number 3 might be a little odd that it's at number 3 and not number 1, but the Beatles, Please Please Me, their debut album, of course. Really tight album, especially for a debut in 1963. The fact that they were able to have the record label agree to them writing half of the songs on here, so different for that time period. Most bands, and especially new bands, they weren't really trusted to write their own material. You know, you guys, maybe later on you can write your own stuff, but we're going to give you all the songs. They wrote half the album, and they chose the covers for the other half of the album. Still, just exploding with energy. I Saw Her Standing There is still one of the great opening songs of all time. So what is number 2 and number 1? It's by the same artist. They're almost tied, so let's just do them together. Number 2, I've got Howlin' Wolf's his self-titled album, also called the Rocking Chair album. And number 1, I have Howlin' Wolf's Moaning in the Moonlight. To me, these two could be 2 parts of a double album. A lot of times I get confused on what's on which album. They're both so good, though. I prefer Moaning in the Moonlight a little bit more, but not by much. But anything by Howlin' Wolf I absolutely love. And these first 2 albums are really Howlin' Wolf at his prime. So those are my top 15 albums for 1959 to 1963. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave some comments below if you agree with the list or you have your own picks. Or I know that I've left out some stuff that people are going to be like, how on earth could you possibly have ignored that album? Well, maybe I don't know about it, but it's possible that it's just not something that I prefer to listen to a lot. So, that said, I will see you here next time where we kind of dig into 1964, the beginning of the British invasion. So until then, bye.